if you could talk to us, how would you define religious freedom?
I define religious freedom as the catchword I would use is optionality. And what I mean by that is I think religious freedom gives us the freedom to fully engage, in our expression of religion. It also gives people the freedom to disengage uh, in that in any expression. And I think um, as a faith leader, I think sometimes there's a tension because we want people to embrace our way of religion, but sometimes we're not open to fully recognizing and acknowledging that there are other forms of religion or faith expression that people you know want to engage in. And so I think you know that tension is healthy, and it's important to offer that expression. And I think in nations and in communities where that expression, where freedom is not fully embraced, I think you can find yourself um, in a faith disadvantage, because I think the expression and the opportunity to understand and to learn about others only ultimately strengthens our own faith, as we unpack it and have to pack it, and to fully appreciate our beliefs.
Thank you. I want to get at a little bit at sort of how do people of faith balance their commitment to God versus the community? We've seen local churches speak out and denounce racial injustice, racial discrimination. Same time, you have people of sincere faith saying, "Oh, I can't take the COVID vaccine for religious reasons." So how does a believer in a pluralistic society, as ours is, balance their commitment to God with their commitment to their fellow man, their fellow citizens?
Yeah. I think the tenets of all religions eh, speak to the fact that we are called to care for. And I mean, the tenets of love exist whether you're Christian or Muslim. The tenets of being a good neighbor are real. The tenets of caring for others, taking care of the least of them. That's not a Christian tenet. That is a tenet of religion, and in faith, when one exercises faith in a higher being. And so I contend that um, there is this notion is around balance. And the challenge is when we think about, and as a man of faith and deep faith, my faith can get out of balance. And I think that's also the beauty and the power of having this diversity and religious freedom and expression is we get to hear and we get exposed to different things that I hope brings greater awareness and understanding about others, but also greater awareness about our own faith and the disjointedness and the problems. Because if there isn't balance, we play to these greater extremes. And we've witnessed how uh, religion can be not a force of freedom or liberty, but also a force of oppression. We can see how we understand it as a person of color, African American descent, how even the faith that I subscribe to, you know, use was used to oppress and to, you know, uh, dehumanize me because of the color of my skin. And so I think it's so critical that notion of balance plays into our understanding of our own faith, and also as we walk along this journey as a pluralistic society, that there are certain things that I think all religious leaders can agree are are um, are right, are morally in alignment with, and then there are things that are just deplorable, and we know that. I mean, from some of the and again, when we're not in balance, those extreme measures come into play. In the name of God, I kill innocent people. that uh, I don't care what religious grounding you stand by on. That is probably not a tenet of of the God that you seek to serve, and there's real danger in that. And I think that's unhealthy. But I think it's also why we are engaged, in wider dialogue with people that don't necessarily think, believe, uh, or sort of adhere to our common religious teachings. I think it's just healthy to engage. Um, I think it will help us create this notion of greater balance and equilibrium.
And then just one last one from me is, can you talk a little bit about how the pandemic, how COVID-19 has affected your congregation's ability to worship, to come together, and what it's meant to sort of try and carry on the rhythm of the church,
Yeah.
the traditions of the church at a time when it's very difficult to gather together.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think the pandemic has helped us all realize that the church or our sort of faith tradition is not defined by a physical location or building, but it really is defined by the people who make up that community, and I think that has been uh, quite evident in our congregation. I mean, we've activated in ways in the community and service that we would have never done, um, and it's opened us up to recognize that we, it's not what we preach and talk about, but it's how we, live that out. And for example, I mean, we were one of the first. We organized some of the first testing sites in Dallas County, uh, in communities that are disadvantaged. So at our church, and we brought other churches into the fold, and we're able to, get, you know, tens of thousands of people tested, and now we actually at the first vaccination community beyond the big mega vaccination sites. We actually had the first community based vaccination site in Dallas County also back in April of this year. So we figured out how to mobilize and recognize that the church really has left the building, and I think also it's helped people gain a greater appreciation for community, because sometimes you can't really appreciate something until you've lost it, or until it's gone missing. And so there's a greater and heightened awareness and commitment to being part of community, and also um, recognizing how volatile or our way of being can can be impacted by the small virus. It literally shut us down. But I will also add that I think it's important to acknowledge, as much as I am an advocate for religious freedom. I also believe there comes sometimes where we have to do what's in the best interest of all. And we were not resistant to the mandates to shut down and to not hold in-person worship. And we probably were one of the last churches, a few to start to come back, um, while many had already sort of returned to in-person, because uh, the virus was disproportionately impacting communities of color and African Americans in a way. We just felt the need that as a shepherd, my job is not simply to feed my flock, but to also take care and care for the flock. In other words, not just their spiritual, but make sure that people are physically, out of harm's way. And if there's a raging virus, we did not want to add to casualties or to those being infected. and also the beauty of being a 21st century community of faith is that technology is our friend, and so we were able to leverage that, and we're actually reaching more people now than we did before the pandemic.
I'll turn it over to Chris. I like your phrase, though. It's not Elvis has left the building, it's the church has left the building. So
That's right.
go ahead, Chris.
Well, thank you again, Reverend Butler. Appreciate it. And I know you're the leader of a historically Black church, and I think you started to kind of touch on this theme a little bit when you were discussing balance. But I'm wondering, what does religious freedom mean to the Black church today?
I don't know if we really spent a lot of time historically thinking about religious freedom and the Black church, but as you pose the question, religious freedom has been, I believe, an core or helped to undergird the work of the Black church, in that the fact that government and others can impose upon the church, and it has this level of freedom, I believe has helped to usher in the civil rights movement, because remember, it was the Black church, Dr. King and others before him that organized. And you think about many public figures that came out of that, most of them were clergy coming out of the Black church. So the Black, in moments of during slavery, they figured out how to leverage the church to send messages to, and they used songs, like "Swing Low, Sweet Chariot Coming." That wasn't talking about heaven. It was a message as a part of the Underground Railroad. So the Black church has been a freedom fighter, for injustice, and in particularly for the rights of African Americans. And so I think this understanding, because I don't know if the success that the Black church has been able to garner in the way of social justice I don't know if we could have the same level of success had it not been for a nation that allows for religious freedom to exist. And so we are, our fight for justice has been illuminated and undergirded behind this very notion of religious freedom.
Well, let me ask you, you talked about it with the Black church, but what do you think it is about the quest for religious liberty that impacts the search for human dignity generally? And that could be racial equality or battling racial injustice. But is there a connection there? And if so, what is that connection?
I definitely believe there's a connection, especially for those of us in Christendom. There's this notion that in God or in Christ, we have liberty, we have freedom, we have life, and I think there's this constant quest to have that realized, not just in our personal expression, but also how that impacts community, how that impacts families, how that impacts how our government operates, and but not to superimpose per se my and this is the tension, not to superimpose my doctrinal beliefs and way of being and thinking, and I think that's also gets back to the notion I talked about earlier in terms of this balance, because when we are when we're striving for this notion of religious freedom, it really is to bring about, as I think in my own faith, is to bring out the best the best of humanity, and the best that is found within you and found within me. And I think that's the connection, and maybe even the marriage or the effort that we're trying to strike, is that in my own faith, I'm striving to be my very best. And I believe that religious freedom at its very best is also ushering in this moment opportunity where, you know, as a society, as a community, we are our very best. And, you know, I have to admit that, you know, we're a far cry from that right now. But, you know, I think tension is healthy. We don't want that tension to devolve to, you know, rage and hate. And and I think we have some of that playing itself out in the collective today. But I'm hopeful and confident that because of the role that the faith community has played and can play in helping to usher in a more a recognition that who we are is far greater than the things that separate and divide us as a society. And I think that's also the beauty in this notion of freedom is recognition, is awareness. And I think that's also part of the freedom in our faith, is that, you know, we want to become more, you know, we become more aware as we get, you know, in my journey, faith journey, and we try to drive people as you get closer to God, there's this greater awareness of things. And so there's this constant overlap between the notion of religious freedom and what we're striving for in our faith journey and walk with God.
I appreciate that answer very much. And let me run one other question by you to get your thoughts on it. And I've been reading about the impact of the rise of the nuns. And when I say that, I don't mean N-U-N-S. I mean people who might consider themselves spiritual, but they have no religious affiliation. So what impact do you think this rise of this group has on religious freedom today?
Wow. Great question. Those who are rooted and grounded, you know, in religion, I think will have to take a step back and to ask the tough probing question, you know, why is there a whole population of nuns? and there's also another group of dones, those DONE, those who are done with, you know, with organized religion. And to your point, you know, to a person, you know, a lot of people will subscribe that I am spiritual, but I don't want to have anything to do with, you know, with religion and organized religion. And I think part of that is, you know, as we unpack the role that religion has played in many instances, it has been the great divider. You know, it has, you know, undergirded, you know, wars and, you know, forms of oppression. And I think there is a segment of our society who just, I mean, I think they want something that's much more authentic and much more pure and genuine. And I think they feel like I can find that on my own versus going to a house of worship. And so I think we as religious leaders have to ask some tough questions of ourselves. You know, where have we dropped the ball? Or clearly we are not as authentic as we think we are. And we may be more dogmatic in our approach. And here's the beauty of religious freedom. If we were in a society where that did not exist, we couldn't wrestle with that kind of question, because I think it's also part of us evolving as beings. You know, the way I saw God 20 years ago is different than the way I see God today. And that should be the case. We all should be evolving. And I think those who are done and those who are none, I think they're helping religion evolve. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that is healthy, because I think it ultimately, and I'll close with this. There's a great philosopher who talks about the ontological argument for God, and he makes the case that which nothing greater can be conceived is God. Therefore, when you have conceived God, God has just transcended your conception. In other words, those of us who think we have God mastered, we have it wrong. And I think maybe the none and dones are forcing us to realize, okay, God has just transcended us. We got to open ourselves up to this whole notion of who God is and how God relates, how we relate to God and how God relates to us and how we should relate to one another.
Reverend, I know that you've led Project Unity here in Dallas. Where do you see respect for religious pluralism or respect for difference in religious beliefs being practiced today? Where are some examples that we can draw from?
You know, we are, and I'll speak to what's going on here locally in Dallas. There is an organization called Faith Forward Dallas. It is a multi-faith organization that is focused on, recognizing um, that we have much more in common than our religious differences, and so it plays to those commonalities, and furthermore, using those commonalities to address some of the common problems that plague our society, and also I think, unfortunately, a crisis and tragedy has a way of mobilizing and bringing people together in ways that you never would have you could not have fathomed or even sort of manipulated yourself. And in wake of whether it was George Floyd here in Dallas, when the 5 police officers were killed in 2016, as a faith leader, I literally saw evangelicals and Muslims and progressives, all progressive Christians, all at the table together. It was something to marvel. So I think there is definitely more of an opening for for that. And as it relates to our work at Project Unity, I mean, we are literally through our Together We Dine, bringing people from various backgrounds to just engage in conversation, courageous conversations about topics that are off limits or most people just don't want to touch. And we're leveraging and we're using the faith community in so many different ways, and whether and that's just not tied to Christianity, but to various faith traditions, to engage in these important conversations, because I think we all realize we have one earth, uh and the more we fight against each other, the more likely we will, I think, in the words of Dr. Martin Luther King, he said, we'll perish as fools. And so not to, we don't want that to be our reality. So I think faith leaders recognize that our differences don't have to keep us divided, and recognizing that our humanity is really what brings us together and should unite us.
Do you see a connection between religious liberty, a country's stability, and a community's stability? Do all those things work together in harmony, or is it something different?
I do think that that's part of community. I mean, that religious liberty, freedom, and I think America is a shining star in that regard. I will acknowledge that whenever you bring people, human beings, into the mix, there are challenges, and there will be problems. But I think that's the beauty in the process of freedom, is that we are ever evolving. We are recognizing things that we did not recognize or understand decades before. And I think even our faith community, because sometimes we're the last to evolve and to embrace what is, and many times we're holding on to what was. But I think all of that represents this healthy tension and balancing act that I think will manifest into as we describe, a more perfect union. And and I would actually add a more perfecting, because it's, I don't think we'll get to perfect, but man, we just want to continue to move towards this perfecting. And that's exciting, and it's encouraging, and it's the work that I believe we as citizens of the world should embrace. And so that means we have our work cut out for us, because there are pockets where the intersection doesn't even, it's not even a conversation. And there are religious, oligarchies that, shut everything down. And even as a man of deep faith, I think that is dangerous, and we want to avoid it. So the work that you guys are doing in this conversation, and just the whole process of freedom is such an empowering vehicle toward us being all that, as I say every Sunday, being all that God has called us to be.